Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits, counting down to the official beginning of another season. The best season of the year, yes, that is summer. But coming at you faster than that is the latest episode with a ton of stuff to uncover in the sports world and beyond, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with your host, JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And now we are down to our precious few finals games. We could have probably just 3 more left when it's all said and done. We could only hope that we could have 4 left, considering that tomorrow night in the Stanley Cup Finals, the Panthers could raise another cup back-to-back over the same team last year, this year, as we all know, between the Panthers and Oilers. I will touch on that in the second segment, but right now I want to start with the NBA because not only with the finals, Game 5 tonight in OKC and what the Thunder did there on Friday, but there was a big blockbuster trade in the NBA, which to me is still puzzling. And then, of course, the Knicks head coaching search, which has been a disaster, as we all know. And then Kevin Durant, where does he go? So a lot of NBA news, notes, and obviously a finals game to get into. And I'll start off with what happened Friday. And once again, we saw this 2 series ago, as I've detailed, it seems like forever here on the podcast, where the Thunder were down 2-1 against the Denver Nuggets in the conference semis. They won a big Game 4 on the road, and we know what happened after that. Same blueprint here. They were down 2-1 in a game that they absolutely had to have. They were down by 7 going into the fourth quarter, and Indiana was unable to extend that 7-point lead as they headed into the final frame, and Oklahoma City found a way. When you're a team as young as they are, but a team that has some resolve and has shown some grit and toughness, as evidenced by what we saw there 2 rounds ago, that cropped up here in this game because as we looked at it, chances are, would the Thunder survive a 3-1 series deficit? The likelihood, probably no. Would it have been shocking if it was a thing where they were able to do that? Absolutely not, but we don't have to worry about it. That is moot. And based on SGA, who did not have a good game up until the fourth quarter, but he made big shots. I know the one shot where it looked like he was about to stumble to the court and took 90 steps to the left side near the baseline where he took that jumper, which was a big basket at the time. That was about, I guess, 4 minutes to go, somewhere around that range. But they were able to get their footing, pun intended, and Jalen Williams also contributed in a big way. A lot of his points were on the free throw line and did not shoot well as far as his standards go. But when Jalen Williams puts up 27 to go along with SGA's 35, that was enough for the Thunder to overtake and outlast the Pacers in a pivotal Game 4, a 12-1 run down the stretch of that game where the Pacers were unable to get baskets. Now, you want to give compliments to the Thunder defense, where we've pretty much blasted them, wondering where this all-time defensive metric team from the regular season, even into this postseason, has gone. Well, they certainly showed up in the biggest time and in the biggest game of the season for OKC. And now that pushes them to a Game 5 tonight, which I'll talk about in a moment. But for the Thunder, they got the one win that they needed. They were able to get that split. And it definitely shows what they're made of. Now they have to seal the deal. They can't piggyback what happened there on Friday night with a dud tonight. And a dud for them means that they're not going to get blown out. But let's say it's a performance of what the Pacers did in Game 3, albeit in Indiana. But if for whatever the reason, Indiana comes out of the gate and they're fast and furious and they get off to an early lead and then hang on the win, you're going to think to yourself, well, that Game 4 victory meant nothing. So they're going to have to win this game tonight, similar to what they did in the Denver series, to at least let it stick and maybe come Thursday night to crown themselves champion as they have to go to Indiana, hopefully up 3-2. And that's how you have to look at it. And as far as Indiana, similar to what we had seen in the Edmonton, Florida series, this is going to be a game that they're probably going to rue all summer long. Now, this was Mano a mano, it was nip and tuck. Obviously, it was very physical. And the game was, I don't want to say go as far as it being a street fight. Certainly not along the lines of that. But it was a grudge match. It was a situation where the Pacers had to fight for every inch and try to get opportunities on the offensive side of the ball, where only Pascal Siakam was the only guy that really contributed offensively. Tyrese Halliburton, no magic from him there in the closing minutes. And then Benedict Mathurin, who had 27 in game number 3, was a no-show in this game. And that's the thing with this Pacer offense. As good as they are and as many options that they have, but they've been very inconsistent in this final. You want to chalk it up again to the Thunder defense, especially in game 4? All right, we could do that. But for them to win this series, they have not gotten big-time contributions from Aaron Nesmith. Andrew Nembhard there the other night did not really give them a boost there offensively, as we've seen here in the series, in particular game 1. And for guys like that, even Miles Turner, who put up 12 points, but again, 12 points isn't going to cut it when you're trying to win and take a 3-1 series lead. So overall, it's a situation where I would think the Pacers will regroup, and we'll segue that into tonight's game. Pacers, they've been on again, off again, and they have not lost 2 in a row in this postseason. So it makes you think that that could bode well for them to win a game in OKC tonight. But one more time, since OKC has gotten off the deck and they're back in this series, I'd actually be shocked if OKC loses tonight, because now that they got their bearings and they got the extra day off, remember, Wednesday to Friday was a quick turnaround. So now having an extra day of respite, and for them to get themselves together, you would think that they're going to put forth a game that we've seen in the first 2. Mind you, they did lose the first game, but they were dominant pretty much throughout. And I don't want to say they had no business losing, because they did miss layups and that SGA shot there prior to the Halliburton winner in game 1. But I would think that it's going to be home cooking, and I would be, again, surprised that if the Pacers come out alive with a victory tonight to go back home to possibly clinch an NBA championship, yes, I would have to say that OKC, one more time, did not fulfill what they did in game 4 tonight in game 5. And I think that's going to be the hammering point if you're Mark Daniel, the coach, to say, hey guys, come on. We don't want to go to Indiana down 3-2. We want to be able to at least go there with a chance to win a championship. And if it doesn't work out, then we know that we have game 7 to fall back on. And not to say that they want to fall back on a game 7, because as we all know, that is a coin flip. That is pretty much a toss-up. So right now, it's all in front of OKC. Same for Indiana for that matter. But I would think OKC will come out on top tonight, and we'll have a recap of that, although it'll be a few days later when we get together on Thursday's podcast. But the good thing is that game 6 will be that night. So we'll preview it, and we'll see where the series falls at that point. So that's what I have with this series. And OKC, think about it. They should be up 3-1. This should have been the coronation tonight. But of course, that's not the case. That's why I think with the way they played here at home, not only throughout the playoffs, but even in the first 2 games, mind you, that slip up in the final few minutes in game 1 against the Pacers. But I really, truly think that they'll win tonight. And then we could talk about a game 6 then, whether that means OKC goes off into the sunset, possibly with a championship, or could it be the Pacers? And one more time, like I mentioned, I'd be surprised if that's going to be the case. So now let's get to that trade with the Grizzlies and the Magic, which just surprised me to no end. And that wasn't even the biggest trade of the weekend, or even the biggest trade of the day for that matter. That was more done by the Red Sox. They told the Orlando Magic, hold my beer. And of course, I'll get to the Devers trade in a little bit. But as far as Desmond Bane, now this isn't a knock on the player at all. Desmond Bane is a very good two-way player, plays very good defense, and can score. And he's a guy that fits like a glove with that Memphis team, despite the fact that they've had their injuries, and of course with everything that had transpired there, even over the last couple of years, with John Morant in and out of the lineup with injuries and suspensions, and having guys like Brandon Clark out and Jaren Jackson to go along with John Morant. Those are the 2 big guys. And Bane is I don't want to say a spare part, but he's just a 3rd or 4th guy on the team. And for the Magic, I don't know what they saw in Desmond Bane to not only trade Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who obviously is a very good glue player, won championships, as we know, with the Lakers and Nuggets. but also to trade Cole Anthony, a young guard, as you've seen here early in the postseason against the Celtics, actually had some moments, and a guy that, all right, fine, maybe with the new look Grizzlies, and who knows what's going to happen there with John Morant long term. Would they even think about trading him? I don't think so. But they bring in a guy that could certainly spell or maybe even fit with John Morant in the backcourt. But then the 4 first-round picks that are unprotected in a pick swap. I mean, Desmond Bane is a borderline all-star. He's not a guy that is a 1 or even a 2 on your team. He is at best a 3 and quite possibly a 4. And how they gave up the farm, and Orlando could say, you know what, we don't have to worry or even need the picks. We got some good young players here with the Jalen Suggs of the world, and obviously the Paolo Banchero, the Franz Wagner, etc. Franz Wagner, that is. And guys like that, Jonathan Isaac, we can look at their nucleus and say, wow, it is pretty good. So to bring a guy like Bane who adds some defense and adds a little bit of character as well as maybe some leadership, all right, fine. But one more time. 4 unprotected first-round picks? This just goes to show you that the Dallas Mavericks, and not to bring this up and dredge this whole nonsense again, but that just goes to show you how much they screwed up in that deal, because if Desmond Bane is worth 4 unprotected first-round picks, and to take it a step further, Mikal Bridges, where the Brooklyn Nets said, all right, can you give us 5 first-round picks, including 4 unprotected? And the Knicks said, sure, why not? Then what the hell is Luka Doncic worth? And all they got was a first-round pick, I think, in 2029 or 2030, which, again, not to break that whole trade down again, but it just goes to show you that these assets are, for whatever the reason, these GMs are calculating it a lot more worth than what they are. And again, it's not a knock on Bane, it's not a knock on his ability, etc. But one more time, 4 unprotected first-round picks, to me, that was way too much to give up for a guy like that. And Orlando, again, I guess they don't look at assets or first-round picks big time, considering that they look at their nucleus and say, this is going to be our team moving forward. Let's bring in some pieces, whether they're veterans, whether they're guys that could take us to the next level. And I guess they looked at Bane as one of those guys. So congratulations to them. Kudos. Let's see how that works out in the long term. But that would be too rich for my blood if I was a GM for Orlando. But God bless them. They're the ones that got Bane and gave up all that draft capital in the process. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is Kevin Durant. I know he's been in the news here over the last few days. And Durant, 37 years of age, I believe in September. A guy that the Suns are going to look to unload. He has 1 more year left on his deal. I believe he's making, what, $52 to $54 million. Now, he has picked 3 destinations. No, the Knicks aren't one of them. He had chosen, based on reports, Miami, San Antonio, or Houston. Now, if you're the Heat, I'm sure Pat Riley, the antenna goes way up, but you don't have much to give up. You're not giving up Tyler Hero. You're not going to give up Bam Adebayo, who are your 2 big assets on that team. Other than that, I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to have to give them 1 million first-round picks, but even then, why would you give up a plethora of picks similar to what the Grizzlies had gotten from the Magic for a guy that still very productive? He averaged 26 points a game, and he's 37, or he's going to be 37 years of age. And you don't see him slowing down at any point. But he's going to get an extension at some point, 2 years, anywhere between $122 to $124 million. Are the Heat willing to pay that second apron, considering that Hero's making a ton? Same for Bam Adebayo, who just signed an extension, I believe a 3-year, like $168 million in that vicinity type of contract. And then you're going to bring in Durant, and you're not going to have much on that bench. You're not going to have a lot of depth. It's going to be a situation similar to what we saw there with Denver, and even with the Knicks for that matter. And even with Eric Spoelstra, he can work the Heat culture and the Magic all he wants, but that's not going to be enough for the Heat to try to get to the next level in a wide-open Eastern Conference next year. So, to me, I'm not going to rule them out because, you know, Pat Riley is going to work wonders, and I'm sure he's going to have to bring in a third team. It's just not going to be straight up between Miami and Phoenix. He's going to have to try to find another suitor out there to see what he could do to work Durant to South Beach. So that's something to keep in mind. But we know that Houston has a lot of young pieces and draft capital, as well as the Spurs. Now, I don't know what they're going to want to do as far as bringing in Durant. We know he's still productive, but let's call it as we see it. These last few years, whether it was in Brooklyn getting swept by the Celtics, when he was a member of the Nets, or going to Phoenix where they lost to the Nuggets. They got swept by Minnesota and initially didn't even make the playoffs. Now, I don't know. Do you want to call that, as far as the organization being dysfunctional, because they went from Frank Vogel to Mike Budenholzer and they actually precipitously had gone south? All right. You can't put it all on the coach, because Bradley Beal seems to play when he feels like it. And Devin Booker's your mainstay, where Durant had been in and out of the lineup with some injuries in the early part of the year. And although very productive, but also not a guy that's going to be a rah-rah leadership A, despite the fact that I've got MVPs and finals MVPs in my back pocket, including 2 championship rings. What has that amounted in Phoenix, and even Brooklyn for that matter, when it comes to Kevin Durant playing on those teams? Absolutely squat, zero, zilch, nada. So if San Antonio and Houston want to go down that road, I would think maybe more so Houston and San Antonio, because San Antonio, I would think they want to keep their pick, which is number 2 overall, and not give up, let's say, a Stephon Castle, that pick, to bring in Durant to go along with Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox. So I would think maybe Houston could be a better fit. Either one of those two, I think, would be a good landing spot for Durant, but it's what the front offices want to do as far as give up and what the Phoenix Suns are going to be asking. And I'm sure they're going to want to ask for the sun, moon, and stars, despite the fact that they do have an aging superstar on their hands. But where he ends up, I don't know. And it could be another team that could be laying in the weeds as far as trying to procure Durant services there. And who knows what that team will be. I don't think he's going to go to the Lakers, people. That's another, I'm sure Rob Pelinka may want to even flirt with that to bring him there with Luka and and LeBron. I don't think that's going to happen. But here we are. Now Durant is going to be another team for him, mercenary. And as we talked about before, we know he's an all-timer. There's no ifs, ands, buts, maybes about it. His height, his handle, his shot making, etc. We know that he is one of the great scorers that the NBA has ever seen. But when you look at his trajectory, and yes, I know that middle spot when he went to Golden State, as vilified as he was for doing that, but he did win those 2 titles, the 2 MVPs, could have gotten a third, although that Achilles blew up on him in Toronto, if you recall. But ever since then, it has not gone well. Yes, individually, he's been able to score and come back from the Achilles, but it has one more time amounted to him not coming close to winning a title. So do those teams out there, are they maybe a little bit shook to think that, well, he hasn't done much. Yeah, he's scored, but he hasn't won anything since he left Golden State. And of course, Curry has won since Durant departed the Bay Area. But all I can say is this. I know he'll be an upgrade, but how much of an upgrade will that be, considering that he's going to be a guy that is going to want the ball, is going to demand the ball, and who knows what that could do to a team that is trying to get to that next level, whether it's the young teams like the Rockets or the Spurs, or a veteran team like the Heat, knowing that the East has come back to the pack with teams like Boston, Milwaukee, who knows what Giannis, as well as Philadelphia. And yes, maybe Indiana and the Knicks will be at the top of the East, but the Heat will probably think that, as long as we can fit into the mix somewhere, we'll have a shot. So we'll see what's going to happen with Durant. So that's the latest there. And speaking of Houston, they signed Steven Adams to an extension. Now, good signing for them, because he is a glue guy, knows what it takes to win, a leader, etc. But he's always hurt. And although he was healthy last year, but when you look at his recent career over the last 3-4 years, he's always out with some sort of nagging injury. So, but kudos to Houston. He's 32 years of age. I believe he'll be 32 next month. So he's still relatively young. How much is he going to give you over the course of the next 3 years? We'll have to see. But again, he's a guy that I'm sure Ime Udoka loves, to be that glue guy, to be a guy that could have that presence in the locker room with those young players. And who knows if they're going to trade some of these players this offseason and try to bring back a guy like Durant or someone else. Let's see. But that's where Steven Adams, he'll stay for the next 3 years. And then the Knicks head coaching search, as I talked about there the other day, the disaster that it was, definitely go back to the archive, just the previous podcast on Apple, Spotify, or even here on YouTube for those who are watching, and Spotify too if you're watching on Spotify. But now they're expected to meet Mike Brown and Taylor Jenkins. So here it goes. They went from trying to pry, whether it be coaches that already been signed on the dotted line, whether it's the aforementioned Udoka or Chris Finch or Jason Kidd in Dallas. And because that blew up in their faces where they were not granted permission, now they have to go the other route to be, all right, well, I guess we're going to have to go with some retreads here because there's no way we're going to go pick a rookie coach or a hot assistant off another team, similar to what the Suns did by bringing in Jordan Ott, who was formerly on the bench for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So now they have the safety net, if you want to call it, of going to those guys that have a reputation and a good one, but is it good enough? Considering everything what Tom Thibodeau had done over his 5-year career there at the Garden, and obviously this past season where he took his team to an Eastern Conference final, lost in 6, and then was disposed just 3 days later. So we'll see where that leads them. If you ask me, Mike Brown, Taylor Jenkins, no offense to those guys, and Brown, I get it, was a guy that brought LeBron 2007 to the finals and was the coach of the year a couple of years ago in Sacramento. But if I'm a Knicks fan, thanks, but no thanks. And Taylor Jenkins, maybe his next stop will be better. And I thought did very well with the Memphis Grizzlies. But again, not a sexy name, not a guy that you're going to think that, oh, he's going to take us to the next level. So, yeah, I would certainly not be satisfied if the Knicks hired one of those two guys. So that's what we have there with the NBA as we look forward to a game number 5 tonight. Now, as I lace up my skates to take a trip around the ice in the National Hockey League, and this game might as well have been like 5 months ago, but Thursday's game between the Panthers and Oilers, game 4, where the Panthers had a 2-1 series lead, and the Panthers came flying out of the gate. They scored 3 goals in the first period, and you thought to yourself, now the Oilers, they're going to be toast. They're going to lose this game. They came out flat, and remember, they were just awful in game 3 when they lost 6-1 and did not try to put forth their best foot forward. In fact, they tried to play Panther hockey, which obviously is the worst recipe that the Oilers could possibly even follow. And then to go down 3-0, they pull Stuart Skinner to bring in Calvin Pickard. I like Picard, it sounds a lot better, but Calvin Pickard, the goalie, and he was phenomenal. Now, he gave up the late goal there to Sam Reinhart in the waning seconds of regulation where the Oilers came back from a 3-0 deficit. They scored 3 goals there in the second period. And then Jake Wallman scores on a one-timer with about 4.5 to go. And you thought to yourself, the Oilers are going to have this come from behind miraculous win, which actually was historic because it was the first time, I believe, in the history of the sport where a team in the Stanley Cup final trailed by 3 goals to come back and win the game. And as it was, when Wallman scored that goal, I thought that they were going to be home free. But the Oilers played tight. They were in their zone for pretty much the whole 2 minutes of that final period. And then, of course, Reinhart gets that goal from a tough angle, wide open net, where Pickard, that was the only blemish that he had, because other than that, he saved everything in sight. And then in the overtime, he had a couple of opportunities, but then Leon Draisaitl, as he goes into the zone off of a line change there by the Panthers, and just, it wasn't an odd man rush, but you had Draisaitl go into the offensive zone where he just poked at the puck, where he had a defenseman pretty much on him, poked at it, went off of the defenseman Nico Mikkola, and then squirted through the 5-hole of Sergei Bobrovsky and passing the goal line into the net, where the Oilers won not a big game, an enormous game, and one that I thought was going to propel them to win a game 5. But like I mentioned, that game seems like it was a lifetime ago, because Saturday night, with the quick turnaround, the Oilers laid a big giant deuce there on center ice. That's the only way to put it. Brad Marchand, who continues and could likely be the Conn Smythe Trophy winner when it's all said and done, he opens the scoring with the goal and gets 2 goals in the game. The other one was just unbelievable, how he went over the defenseman, and he's a small guy. It's not as if he's 6'5". Goes over the defenseman. They didn't play the body, they played the puck, and next thing you know, similar to Draisaitl's goal, and similar to the goal that he scored there in the overtime in game 2, where it squirted through the legs of the goaltender, and in this case, it squirted through Pickard's legs, where the Edmonton Oilers had absolutely no answer, because the Panthers played the brand of hockey that we've watched over the last 3 years, and have become accustomed to witnessing. They played hard-nosed, checking, suffocating defense, and cashed in on opportunities as they did there on Saturday night. And that is pretty much the game in a nutshell. I know that Connor McDavid tried to draw closer to make it 3-1, but then literally, a minute and a half later, Reinhart scores that goal, and it was just a terrible... I understand that it was maybe tough to stop, but that's a puck that Pickard should have been able to stonewall and was unable to do so. And then even though the Oilers there late with the man pulled, the goalie pulled for an extra man, and they cut it to 4-2 with about 3.5 minutes to go. But then Eetu Luostarinen gets the empty netter there to make it 5-2, and it was just a textbook win by the Panthers. And now we'll have a game tomorrow night in Sunrise for another potential Stanley Cup win in their building, similar to what we saw last year in the Game 7. And how I look at this game, I don't know if I trust the Oilers. I really don't. Because they were resuscitated in that game. And they fought, scratched, and clawed, and not a lot of mistakes there by the Panthers. The Oilers cashed in on those opportunities in Game 2 in that second period. And then even the Wallman shot. Now, again, that could have been a puck that Sergei Bobrovsky should have been able to stop, but Wallman, perfect shot on the stick side, weak side, and he was able to get it past. And what can you say? Wallman, give him credit. So it wasn't a situation where the Panthers had just played undisciplined or they were playing sloppy and Edmonton cashed in on it. No, the Oilers just stuck to their game plan and won. And that's what you were hoping to see there Saturday night if you're an Edmonton Oilers fan. And what you saw there was, even though they had opportunities early, Connor Brown had on the right side, had a good opportunity to score there on Bobrovsky. And then seconds later, where Connor McDavid had a shot right there in the goal mouth, but was unable to slam it in. And those two opportunities then led to Marchand opening up the goal scoring, and then that was it. Not to say that the floodgates came afterwards, because although it was 2-0, and then he got the third goal when you got to the start of the third period, but Edmonton was unable to get any big-time quality chances. Did they have opportunities? They did, but nothing along the lines of the way the game opened up, where they were flying out of the gate, and then afterwards, it just seemed to be the Panthers forechecking, back-checking, just suffocating the Oilers at every step of the way. And even though McDavid finally did get to score his first goal of the series, and now it's going to be tomorrow night, I don't want to say it all falls on McDavid, but now McDavid's going to have to put on his cape and bring this team back to Edmonton. Because if you recall, when they were down 0-3 in games 4 and 5, he scored 8 points in those 2 games. And he's going to have to put up an effort similar to that in these next 2 games in order for them to hoist that cup above his shoulders and the rest of his teammates. Anything less than that, and I'm a little bit worried about the goaltending. I'd have to keep Pickard in there. I know you could go back to Skinner, but what does that tell you if you're the head coach, Chris Knobloch? Because if you put Skinner back on the road, that could be a situation where it could implode early on. And the one thing that the Oilers are going to have to fight through, and not just the first 10 minutes or even the first 5 minutes for that matter, they're going to have to fight through the whole game. Because A, they're going to have to play from in front. They absolutely must. They can't even be down 1-0. Because then they're going to play tight, they're going to press, and I could just see that all unraveling. Just think of Game 7 last year, where Florida got the first goal, and then literally a minute and a half later, I believe they tied the game on a breakaway. But then once they got the second goal, the Panthers, that's when the Oilers were scrambling, and the Panthers played their brand of hockey, and then that was it. Next thing you know, the confetti came down, and the Panthers were Cup champs. So to me, tomorrow's game is, I have to say it, it's going to fall on McDavid and the goaltending. Whether it's Pickard or Skinner. They're going to have to stand on their heads. Pickard's going to have to dial it back to Game 4 and have that type of performance if they even think about having a Game 7 there in Edmonton come Friday night. And I hope that's the case. I want to see a 7th game. I don't think so more for the NBA, although Adam Silver and company would do handstands. So that would be 3 games there and then 2, so you have 5, but chances are you may just see 3 games left, where tonight you'll have a Game 5, and if OKC wins, they're going to look for the capper there on Thursday night, and then who knows, tomorrow night you can have the Panthers win and you'll have 3 finals games as opposed to 5. I hope to see a 7th game in the NHL more in the NBA for my liking, because I want to see it go to distance. And if it does go to distance in the NBA, so be it. That game will be on Sunday night. But I tell you, again, it's too much pressure to say to Connor McDavid, you got to win this game, based on what we've seen the Panthers do to try to slow them down and to try to just neutralize them as best as they possibly can. But McDavid's going to have to put forth a 1-goal, 3-assist type of game in order for them to get back home with a chance to win a Stanley Cup. That's it. And even if it's a situation where Pickard and or Skinner is in net and they give up 3 or 4 goals, this is where McDavid is going to have to be gargantuan. This is where he's going to have that 4-point night or 5-point night, because they're going to have to win a 5-4 game. They're not going to win a 2-1 game. Could they win a 2-1 game? They could. But based on what we've seen with this goaltending, that's not the case. I mean, just think about the scores in these games along the way. They've all been 4-3, 6-1, 5-2, 5-4. I mean, these have been high-scoring games. So I don't expect the goaltending all of a sudden they're going to pitch a shutout, where we've seen Stuart Skinner do so, where we've seen Calvin Pickard play well in this series. But I don't trust their goaltending. I really don't. And I can see the Panthers winning tomorrow night. I'm rooting like hell for the Oilers, big time. But I don't know. I'm at a point where I think the Panthers, they do not want to get on a plane to play a Game 7. But if there is some silver lining before I move it along, you could think back to the previous series where the Panthers were up 3-0, and mind you, they had a cushion, but they lost a Game 4 before going to get on a plane to Carolina before they finished them off there in Game 5. And then in the previous series, when they were up 3-2 against Toronto, and looked like they were going to put the Maple Leafs out to pasture, what happened? The Maple Leafs won 2-0 before going back to Toronto, and then they spanked them, I believe, in a 6-1, 6-2 type game. So it is possible that Edmonton can win this game. And there is a little part of me that has faith. But I will say this, and obviously we'll talk about it Thursday if the Oilers survive tomorrow. Do you trust the Oilers in a Game 7? Because we've seen the Panthers win on the road, a la in Carolina, and in a Game 7 in Toronto. Keep that in mind if the Oilers happen to win tomorrow night. Now, you also had another trade in the NHL the other day where, no surprise, the Rangers, with the rumors surrounding Chris Kreider, who I believe is all time, he's one of their top goal scorers in the history of the franchise, with power plays, things of that nature, even games played along those lines, because I believe he's been, 13 years with the team. Now, he becomes a cap casualty, considering that they want to free up some space. They trade him to Anaheim for a prospect, Carey Terrence, and a 3rd-round pick, and they also send a 4th-round pick. So I'm sure the Ranger fan, they knew that this was coming. This wasn't a surprise, not blindsided by this. So I'm sure, I won't go as far as saying teary-eyed, but I'm sure they probably feel sorry for their guy, homegrown, been with the team a long time, been to a cup final, one of the last players, I believe he was probably the final player on that team that was a part of that 2014 team that went to a cup final and lost to the Kings in a 5-game series. So it was a 7-game series, but in 5 games, I should say. But for Kreider, he goes to Anaheim. He reconnects with Jacob Trouba, a guy that got shipped to Anaheim there in the middle of the season last year, and actually was on his list for a team that he did not want to get traded to. And I understand the Ducks are trying to find their way, and they have made some moves here so far this early offseason. So who knows if Kreider could be that one guy that will fit in there nicely to go along with some of the veterans to kind of take them to the next level. So, hey, we'll see what happens there. But Kreider gone, as I'm sure the Ranger fan is sorry to see him go, but I'm sure he'll get a big ovation. The video, once he returns there as a member of the Ducks. So that's the only big news as far as trades that were made here over the last few days. And as we all know, once the Cup final concludes, we have the draft forthcoming and then free agency on the 1st of July. And we all know it's going to be a little bit frenetic then, especially with the NBA side by side when it comes to player movement in the NHL, and of course, on the hardwood in the association. All right, now let's turn our attention as we get to the diamond. Getting in the batter's box, take a couple of hacks here. A lot of baseball news to report, and the biggest one of all was what happened there yesterday, late afternoon into the early evening, and I was just stunned by the trade, the Red Sox shipping Rafael, the former third baseman, now DH, who could have been turned first baseman, but said which seemed to be the last straw by the front office of the Red Sox, and the hierarchy said, we got to do something to get this guy off the team, considering they have a lot of young studs coming through the pike, the Roman Anthonys of the world, the Marcelo Mayers, the Christian Campbells, who's already been up with the team, among many others. And for Devers to be sent to San Francisco for a couple of pitchers, Jordan Hicks, who is the former flamethrower of the Cardinals, who threw about, 103, and will certainly be a nice addition to that bullpen. They also get a starting pitcher, Kyle Harrison, who supposedly has a very good arm and is pretty much the prize of this trade. 23 years of age, young, hopefully on the come up if you're a Red Sox fan. And then they also got the number one pick of the Giants last year, as well as another prospect to be named later. And upon first glance, as the shock was still trying to wear off, I thought that the Red Sox did a good thing here. Now, Devers, as we all know, moaned and groaned throughout spring training, did not want to get off at third base. I get it. The ego got in the way to where I've been with this franchise or part of this organization going back 12 years, won a World Series here, and, of course, getting handsomely paid with the 11-year, $313 million contract. He felt that he's the face of the franchise, that I don't have to kowtow or have to be second fiddle to anybody here. Once Bregman was brought to Beantown, of course, third baseman in his own right, and knocked him from the third base position to DH. So his ego took a hit there where he accepted being a DH. And then we all know once Tristan Casas, the first baseman, was done for the year with that knee injury, then they asked Devers to play first base. He said, They're jerking me around. I wanted to play third base. They wanted me to DH, and I capitulated, and now I'm the DH. And now they want me to play first base? Find somebody else to do that. And when you call out the front office, and when you are going to be petulant with the amount of money that you're making, so on and so forth, and I get it. It's still a corner position, and you know how I felt about it when I discussed it a few weeks ago. You're making that much money. You're playing. Nobody's asking you to catch. Nobody's asking you to play right field. They're asking you to play first base, which is a lot busier than third, but it is a position that anybody can pretty much handle. And Devers said, I stiff arm that. So he gets sent to San Francisco. I thought it was a shrewd move by the Red Sox and a good move, because who knows what was going on in the clubhouse. Maybe there was some disconnect there. Not only with what happened in spring training, but maybe recent events with the whole, I'm not playing first base, whatever. And they looked at Devers as being selfish, so they got him off the team. And mind you, this comes on the heels of a 3-game sweep, which I'll unpack a little bit further in a minute. 3-game sweep of the Yankees, as they won 5 out of the 6 in the last 2 weekends, including Devers, and a parting gift to the Red Sox fan, unbeknownst to them at the time. When the Red Sox had a 1-0 lead, he hits a home run there off of Max Fried to make it 2-0 as they sweep the Yanks and win 2-0. But now he gets shipped to the West Coast. They bring the young players and the pitchers abroad. And I thought shrewd move. And now is this an even bigger move for the Giants? I have to say it is. Now they're taking on the brunt of the final 10 years and $250 million of that contract. It's a big risk. Chances are he's going to play DH because they already have a third baseman and Matt Chapman, who they signed to a 6-year, $151 million deal this past offseason. So as far as Devers maybe trying to squeeze in the third, that's not going to happen. And I'm sure they're not going to put him at first base. So he's likely to be the DH now moving forward. But I'm sure Devers changed the scenery in a pennant race as the Giants lost 2 out of 3 to the Dodgers, and they lost a bad game there to the Rockies, which would have propelled them in a first-place tie and would have been one back as of today, but they're now 2 games behind the Dodgers in the NL West. But now this puts them front and center as a team that is going to make a push for a playoff spot. Not even just in the wild card scenario, but for the division. Because the Dodgers Obviously, they have not gotten off to, they got off to that 8-0 start, as we know, but with their number being 104.5 in Vegas, and a lot of people thought they were going to win anywhere between 108 to 112 games, that is not going to be the case. So you may have a scenario a la 2021 where it was Dodgers, Giants neck and neck to where the Giants won the division at 107 and 55, where the Dodgers were 1 game behind, and we know what happened in the divisional series, a 5-game series where the Dodgers won in 5 and put the 107 regular season win Giant team out to pasture. Now, is that going to be a carbon copy this year with the amount of wins? Absolutely not. But there could be a chance that we may see these two teams fight it out for a division title when we get to August, September, and beyond. So I thought it was a good move on both parts. The Giants, they finally get that star. Remember, they were trying to bring in Carlos Correa. That didn't work out. They tried to bring in Aaron Judge. That didn't work out. They were in the talks for maybe Shohei Ohtani. That didn't work out. Even Juan Soto, that didn't work out. So now they finally get a guy that, although is a DH, but they have a stick that they can rely on and can even lengthen that lineup a little bit more and maybe even take a lot of pressure off of Willy Adames, who signed his own big deal this offseason, where he has been awful. What does he have? 7 home runs, 30 RBIs. He has certainly underachieved the contract that he got from the Giants this past winter. So maybe that will take some pressure off of him. We'll see some better pitches. So I think this is a bonus for everybody. Now, how it will play out, we have to watch and witness and see for ourselves. But I thought this was very shrewd on the Red Sox, and I thought a good move. I don't know how the Red Sox fan feels about it. I got one in my life who's very close to me, so I got to reach out to him to see what he thinks and feels about it. I'm sure he's probably good riddance, even though the lineup's going to take a big hit. But that trade goes down, and that was the big story of the weekend there in baseball. Now, the other story were the sweeps, and there were plenty abound. The Phillies sweeping Toronto to put them 2 games back of the Mets. And the Mets and Phillies will play this coming weekend. So that's a series that I'll talk about more on Thursday's podcast. But for the Phillies to sweep, then you have the Mets get swept by the Tampa Bay Rays in, let's face it, embarrassing fashion. The Mets had a 5-1 lead Friday night in the opener of the series going into the top of the 6th. They gave up 6 runs in the 6th. The Rays took a 7-5 lead, and from that point on, they didn't even look back. They win Friday night 7-5. They win Saturday 8-4, and then yesterday the coup de grace as they shut out the Mets and embarrassed them and win 9-0. So now they've actually moved up in the standings in the AL East, which they're now within striking distance of the Yankees. And who would have thought? The Rays, who have been fumbling, bumbling, and stumbling, they played a majority of their home games here in the middle part of June because of the situation at the Trop. They got to play Steinbrenner Field, and because they had to front load their schedule, now with it being rainy and hurricane season to where they're going to play a ton of road games from here on out, and here they are. What are they, 9 games over 500 at this present moment? As I pull up the standings here in the AL East, and just a tremendous job by Kevin Cash. I mean, what could you say? They're actually 7 over, 39 and 32, and are 4 in the loss and 3.5 back of the Yankees. So give it up. And obviously, as I mentioned before, with the Yankees getting swept by the Red Sox over the weekend, and Aaron Judge, who went 1 for 12, although the one hit was a huge one, tied the game in the 9th inning off of Garrett Crochet, who was pitching a gem, 8 1/3 before he got knocked out, and then they won in extras there in a walk-off in the bottom of the 10th. But the Yankees, all of a sudden, look anemic offensively, and although they're getting reinforcements, maybe Giancarlo Stanton will be in the lineup tonight against the Angels, if not tonight, at some point in the coming days. So that is going to be a bat that they're certainly going to welcome into their lineup. But for Judge, who had the only hit of the weekend, that home run against Crochet, 1 for 12, which now sees his average go from 394 in the middle of the week when he was just destroying the Royals to now 378. So we could put to rest him hitting 400 this year, but we could still give him the MVP trophy in the American League, despite the fact that he was awful over the weekend in Beantown. So with all those sweeps happen, and then you had the Astros sweeping the Twins to where the Tigers, now they could pretty much put their feet up for the rest of the summer as they have a 9-game lead over the Twins. Guardians 9.5 as they got swept over the weekend in embarrassing fashion as the Mariners took care of business up in the Pacific Northwest. So once again, with the Twins, Guardians, and even Royals, who also sweep Central. And pun intended there with the AL Central. And the Royals inexplicably got swept by the Athletics at home after getting swept by the Yankees, as you know. So they have certainly hit an abutment. So, like I mentioned, that's the theme here over the weekend with all these sweeps. So for the Central, you got some troubles there, even though the Tigers are going to win that division on roller skates. So that's what we have there with the baseball. But also another big news of note tonight, Shohei Ohtani is going to toe the rubber for the first time since he was a member of the Angels as the Padres come up the freeway in the start of, I believe that could be a 4-game series. I'll take a look at the schedule in a minute. But when you have Ohtani towing the rubber, and we know he's going to be on a pitch count, we know it's going to be a scenario where they probably have 55, 60 pitches in that arm. I don't know what the recent report was, but you know it's not going to be of any length. Hopefully he'll be economic and maybe pitch 5 innings. I'm sure they want to get to that 5th inning mark to maybe see if the Dodgers have a lead that he could possibly come out with a win. But here's the first step back after Tommy John surgery and the $700 million that he got 2 off seasons ago, where Ohtani lies. And I don't expect big things. I expect there's probably going to be some nerves. I expect there's going to be butterflies. I don't expect him to go out and he's going to strike out the side to open up the game. He's probably going to walk batters. Who knows? But all eyes will be on Dodger Stadium to see how he's going to perform in his first appearance on a mound in a regular season game in almost 2 years. So we'll talk about that on the channel, YouTube, as I'll bring that up tomorrow to see how he fares there as a Dodger pitcher for the first time. So that, and then you also had this kid from Milwaukee, Jacob, I'm going to butcher his name, of course, Misiorowski, I believe that's how you pronounce it, where he was brought up, highly touted prospect, where he throws 103, and he's a starter, people, and that was to the chagrin of Aaron Savali, who was going to be demoted to the bullpen, but said, I'm not going to the bullpen. And then he gets traded to the White Sox for the first baseman, Andrew Vaughn. He did pitch in a game yesterday to where he walked the ballpark in the first inning, and although pitched 5 innings, but did not pitch well. And Savali is a guy, he's a right-hander, has to pitch to spots, does not have a high velocity arm, and he gets his wish, although he gets traded to the White Sox. So that's, of course, one of the worst teams in the sport, but he does have a job, and he will start for the White Sox. How well he will fare, that remains to be seen. But I had to bring up Misiorowski because he's a guy that is going to be on notice, knowing that he has a live arm, a rocket of an arm. But in the 5 innings that he pitched there the other night, he gave up no hits. He walked a few guys, but had to leave due to cramping, I believe. So Misiorowski is a guy who has not given up a hit in his first Major League appearance. So let's see how he does as the Brewers, of course, try to see if they can inch toward the Cubs there in the NL Central. Now, before I get to the schedule overall, Yankees, even with their 3-game losing streak in Fenway, like I mentioned, 4 over the Rays in the loss column, but 3.5. And even with the Blue Jays getting swept, they didn't lose much ground, or any ground for that matter, as they are 4.5 behind the Yankees as well. And even with the Red Sox sweep, they are 8 in the loss, but 6.5 back. But we wouldn't think that they have any shot at the division. But for those who are curious, considering that they did beat the Yanks, they did get 3 games in the standings on them. So that was impressive. We talked about the AL Central. The West, the Astros have a 4-game advantage, 4.5 over the Mariners. Angels get swept in Baltimore, so you could probably say goodbye to them, although they're 7.5 back, but still. Rangers playing a little bit better. They swept the White Sox, as we talked about with Aaron Savali, and they've won 4 in a row. So let's see where that leads them in a division where they're 5.5 back and what? 5 in a loss. Make that 6 in a loss, so we'll keep that in mind. Mets, Phillies. Now, interesting week for the Mets. They play the Braves in Atlanta before going to Philadelphia. And I believe that series, I should know off the top of my head, JAYREELZ, you would think that that'd be the case. They're going to the House of Horrors, as we know. No, it's not Fulton County Stadium or Turner Field. It is Truist Park, or whatever it's called. It is Truist Park right now. But they'll play just 3 games. Tomorrow, they'll have a day off today, 3 in Atlanta, and then 3 against Philly over the weekend. And even with the Braves fumbling, bumbling, and stumbling, I'm sure when they look at the blue and orange, they just light up. And let's see how they're going to perform here over these next 3 days as the Mets try to keep themselves at least 3 games ahead of the Phillies. They do not want to go in less than that because then the Phillies could overtake the Mets in the division as we get through the middle of the month. So just keep that in mind as we move it along. The Central, as I mentioned, Cubs and Brewers, 6 in the loss, 5.5 back. Cardinals have taken a couple of steps back. So the Cubs look like they're in good shape there. And in the West, we've already talked about with the Dodgers, even the Padres. Now the Diamondbacks had a bit of a winning streak before they lost yesterday to the Padres, as they're now a game over 500. But the Padres still 2 in the loss, 3 back of the Dodgers there in the division. And as far as the schedule here this week, you had the Reds winning 2 out of 3 in Detroit, I might add. I wanted to just throw that in the mix. Series of note, Phillies are playing in Miami, 4 games, just as a precursor to the Mets series. Colorado at Washington, as Washington's lost 8 in a row. Even the Marlins went and swept them over the weekend. Baltimore at Tampa, Boston at Seattle, Houston Athletics, San Diego at LA. Then you have Pittsburgh at Detroit, Arizona, Toronto, Minnesota, Cincinnati. Cardinals at White Sox, Royals at Rangers, Milwaukee at Chicago. There you go. Let's see what the Brewers are going to do there in Chicago as they try to gain some ground. Big series. Cleveland at San Francisco, Houston Athletics, San Diego, LA. Let me see if that is a 4-game series. No, we don't want to look at that. San Francisco and LA. That was yesterday. Now, if that's a 4-game set, which I believe it will be, and with the Padres 2 games back, let's see what they could do here over the course of these next 4 days. Yes, 4 night games, as they will hash it out between the NL West rivals. So that's a series that we'll certainly talk about when we get to Thursday's podcast. But that's what you have there for the baseball and the early part of the week. Now to wrap it up, the U.S. Open. Golf, not tennis. That will be at the end of August into September as I take a sip. As we talked about on Thursday, we knew that the golf course was going to play huge. We knew that this was going to be a course, as we've talked about, and that Country Club at Oakmont in Pennsylvania is a behemoth. And boy, was that the case throughout the course of the weekend. And most included yesterday, because if you watch the final round, which I did, I didn't watch the complete final round because it was, I have to call it like I see it, it was an eyesore to see these golfers just chip away, scratch, claw, the rough, the lie, the bunkers. I mean, this was just a disaster class. And give it up. These guys did all they could, whether it was the elements, the golf course itself, no matter what. But if you're Sam Burns, and not to use a pun here, but I know that your stomach and your gut, it is burning, because that was a tournament. I'm not going to say it was for his to lose, but he was on the top of the leaderboard throughout the weekend, including JJ Spaun. And that's what also, I have to say, that also added a not so good wrinkle if you're a casual sports fan or even just a good sports fan, because when you don't see the big names at the top of the leaderboard, Bryson DeChambeau, who I thought was going to win, didn't even make the cut. Phil Mickelson, you can forget about his career Grand Slam because his 5 years of exempt is out after this U.S. Open, which he also didn't make the cut. And not that Mickelson's anything to really discuss, but I just wanted to throw that in the mix. But a lot of these golfers did not make it out alive as far as the cuts go, and Rory did not play well either. He said, I'm looking forward to the Open next month, Northern Ireland at Portrush, which will be a month from now. But for Sam Burns and Victor Hovland and guys who were hovering at the top or near the top of the leaderboard that were unable, Adam Scott is another one, how can I forget him, where they just imploded down the stretch. And Burns in particular, where he had a situation where he double bogeyed on 15 and he was hoping to get some water relief, because as you saw there, if you watched, anytime that these golfers were to swing, not necessarily from the rough, but whether it was on the green or in the lie, all you saw was just water go everywhere. And even off the tee where the ball landed on the fairway, it almost looked like a stone skipping in a river. And you have to play through the elements. It wasn't as if it was bad. And as it was, they had to sit out 96 minutes due to a rain delay. So you knew that this was going to be tough sledding. It was going to be a slog for these golfers to get through this tournament, especially yesterday. And give it up. JJ Spaun, who was waffling back and forth, near the top, at the top, dropped. You didn't think he had any shot. It looked like it was going to be Adam Scott and Sam Burns neck and neck, as you saw there in the front nine and even at the start of the back nine. But where Burns got that double bogey on 15, that ousted him. And then Adam Scott, who was looking for his first majors since the Masters back in 2013, he also fell apart late. And it was JJ Spaun who hung in there somehow, some way, and it's a great story. 34 years of age, from LA, winning his first major. And listen, I get it that he made a 64.5-foot putt to win the tournament, but let's face it, it was not a tense, just absolutely had to make that putt, because remember, he was even at that point and was shooting for birdie. So even if he missed and he was within the cup and would have shot par, he would have won the tournament. So it's not as if he needed that birdie to win the tournament. Now, albeit it was an unbelievable putt. Anytime, 64.5 feet, that is big time. And that's not to diminish or knock that putt by any means. But he did have some leeway. So you have to call it like you see it there, because it's not as if, now that would have been unbelievable theater if he actually needed that putt to win the tournament. Because now I understand things could have gone awry. He could have hit it too hard. He could have hit it short. He could have went left, could have went right, could have went 8 feet away. And that would have added another layer to this tournament if he would have not made the birdie putt. And let's say for par missed, where it would have been a playoff against, of all people, because this was a guy that wasn't on anybody's leaderboard when you watch. And it was one of those situations where, as I bring it up here, it was one of those situations where you knew, or at least in my gut watching, that even if he didn't make that putt, if he was within, let's say, 8 feet, I thought he would have sunk in and won the tournament. Now, who knows? He probably would have missed it and would have added that extra layer to what was already a laborious day of golf. But with Robert McIntyre, who no one even thought was going to be anywhere near the top of the leaderboard, but because everybody fell back to the pack and McIntyre actually played well in this final round, but McIntyre did not have to worry about, or I shouldn't say he didn't have to worry, Spaun didn't have to worry about a playoff, because he sunk that putt, which had him 1 under for the tournament and had him 2 under McIntyre overall. And, man, that was, one more time, people, it was only riveting from the standpoint of not only who was going to win, because obviously that's what you watch to see who's going to win, but between the ears and even in the gut, who was going to be able to overcome the elements, who was going to be able to overcome the delay. And in fact, the delay actually helped JJ Spaun, as he mentioned in the post-match interview, how it got him to regroup. It got him to settle down a little bit, because from his caddy and his team, they said that he was trying a little bit too hard, that he knew that he could smell and sense that he was at the top, and he didn't even want to look at the leaderboard as he was approaching 18. And of course, he also birdied 17, which helped, because that what gave him the cushion to make him hit that 64.5-foot putt, even though I'm sure in a million years he probably didn't think he was going to make that. But by him birding on 17, it did give him that cushion to know that he didn't have to worry about having to secure a championship on having to make a long putt. So JJ Spaun, congratulations. Good for him. Good to see a guy that was on nobody's radar to win this tournament, and for him to come out on top, kudos to him, as I believe he won $4 million, which is the most he's ever made on any tournament. And obviously he's going to be exempt here over the next 5 years, and who knows how that's going to lead into the Open next month there at Portrush, as I talked about. But man, that was just and we knew it was going to be tough. I talked about this on Thursday. You're probably not going to see a golfer that's going to be 10, 11, or double digits under for the tournament. Far from it. You had Spaun, who was 1 under. And I looked it up, and I'm sure they probably mentioned on the broadcast, the last golfer to win at even par, one more time, to win at even par or to win a tournament over par was Angel Cabrera on that same course back in 2007. So we knew going in that Oakmont was going to be a mother, and it was going to be one that, even if you're gripping and ripping like DeChambeau, who I thought was going to be a guy that was going to come out, and remember, he won the U.S. Open last year. So obviously he wasn't able to defend his title from a year ago, but we knew that this was going to be just a brutal weekend. And that if somebody, and coming into yesterday's, Sam Burns coming in was what? I believe 4 under for the tournament. And Spaun was 3 under, and he was tied with, I don't think he was tied with Hovland. I have to go back and look. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick. But it's not as if these guys, after the 3rd round, were at -1 or even or plus. They were a few strokes under. And just goes to show you that the way it all unfolded there yesterday, it only ended up as Spaun on top, 1 under for the entire tournament. Let me see. Can I pull up the scorecard here real quick, people? No, let's go back here. I don't want to kill any more of your time. Look at Scotty Scheffler. I know he had a rough weekend. And although he played gutty, but still was nowhere near in sight of him trying to win this thing. Here we go. Finally got this up. Yeah, even the Tyrell Hattons of the world and Cameron Young, who came back and looked respectable there. But going after the 3rd round, as I pull this up, no, I know Ortiz shot a 67, and he was in the mix too, Carlos Ortiz. Yeah, it's not pulling up here. I don't want to waste too much time, but I know the golfers that were at the top of the leaderboard were 3 and 4 under, and 2 golfers. I know Spaun for sure and Burns as well. It was probably Adam Scott that was also -3. And to think, Scott ended the tournament based on what we saw there. He ended as, this is not pulling up here. Can I get this position? There we go. Thank you. Burns ended at 4 over, and Scott ended at 6 over. And these are guys that are in the mix going into the back 9, and then it all just went kaput. So yes, they may look back on this tournament because of the weather and because of just the nature of how it all unfolded, leaderboards just switching, moving up and down the ranks throughout the course of the final round, etc. But yeah, that was just a tough one to watch, despite the fact of the fairy tale ending there by Spaun winning the U.S. Open there at Oakmont. And that'll wrap it up, people. Another episode just about in the books, as always. Thank you so much for passing by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the toy department of life, as we know, called sports. And you know the drill, people. As I say at the end of every podcast, please subscribe, rate, review, throw me a few stars, write a review. Go to the YouTube channel, subscribe there as well. Increase the visibility of this podcast, the channel, which is the little engine that could, as I call it, as I try to inch closer to 1,000 subscribers and start to monetize, whether you do or do not know. I'm doing this independently, full-time. I do not have a part-time job or a full-time job, and I'm doing this as a side hustle. This is it, people. So whatever it is that you can contribute toward the podcast by the aforementioned subscribing, rating, making sure that you're on top of it, send it to your family, friends, foes, frenemies. Take a screenshot, send it to me on social media. I would sincerely and gratefully appreciate it. And to talk about those social media accounts, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, or on Instagram at JAYREELZ, Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just a number. The old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ Podcast at gmail.com if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion, or hit me up on any of the DMs. I would be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, there's what I love to do, people. In the blood, in the DNA, as I like to say, it's in every fiber of my being. Talking sports since birth. Talking about all that's happening with nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury, with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond. Peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.